welcome to the Fourth Down and Goal podcast, and we are going for it. My name is Jeff. I'm your host. Thank you guys for joining me on another edition of my UFL roster breakdown series. Today, I have the pleasure of having a guest on, Jake from the UFL Panthers Shadow. We'll get into that interview in a minute. Very thankful to have had him on the show. He provides a ton of insight onto what I think is honestly a really underrated Michigan Panthers team. So super excited for that. Really glad to have had a conversation with somebody who works a lot closer to the team and was able to answer a lot of questions and even reaffirm some of the suspicions that I had about this team actually being able to achieve quite a bit this year. But before we get into that, really quickly, got to do the shameless plug. If you could do this show a huge favor and just leave a quick 5-star review on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. Again, on those Apple Podcasts, doesn't matter what you say in the review itself. Make something up on the fly. Make something. Just type in ASDF. It really doesn't matter. It's just those 5 stars that count. But it really does help my show grow. And then if you are watching or listening on YouTube, if you could just give this video a quick like and maybe hit that subscribe button and the notification bell while you're at it. Again, just a quick, easy way to help the show. I really do appreciate it. And then if you want to follow the show on social media, real quick, I only have 2 handles, so I'm pretty easy to find. I am at Fourth Down and Goal Pod on Instagram and on X, Twitter, whatever. I am at Fourth Down Goal Pod. They didn't allow me enough character space to put Fourth Down and Goal Pod. I'll have to try and fix it one of these days, but that's what it is for now, and I'm salty about it because it just sounds so silly. And really quickly, while you're at it, do the same for Jake from Panthers Shadow. Really easy to find. He is at UFL Shadow on Twitter and Instagram, and I believe just about any platform you can find him on. It is at UFL Shadow. So really quickly, just go and give him a follow. And let's get into this interview, man. Again, super insightful, and I really appreciate Jake for coming on. So today with me, I got Jake from UFL Panthers Shadow. Really excited to be doing this, man. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, glad to be doing this. Thank you for having me on. Love talking some football on a Saturday as we lead into this season here in a couple weeks.
Absolutely. So tell us a bit about yourself, how you came to love football. Who's your NFL team?
Well, as of late, it has been the Lions. Because local, but Tom Brady being a big Michigan fan, that's where I really got my start in. The Patriots for a while, but now I'll admit maybe being a little bit of a fair weather fan, but I always rooted for the Lions. But now that they actually seem to be doing well under MCDC, definitely come back into the fold. So maybe a little bit of fair weather fandom there, but I'm going to excuse it with how historically bad the Lions have been. But yeah, basically got into football with watching college football with Michigan. Kind of that's really where it was a slow burn. I didn't catch on to it nearly as quickly as my dad and my brother did, but right around when I turned 18, it kind of really started to pique my interest, and then I've just been all in on that, and then caught wind of the AAF with spring football specifically, and just kind of fell in love and followed it from there, from the AAF to XFL 2020 to USFL and XFL 2023 last year, and then of course leading into the first season of UFL here in a couple of weeks.
Right on. I'm definitely no stranger to historic my team causing me pain throughout our history. I'm a Chargers fan, so I definitely understand some of the fair weatherness about that. I think I kind of had to step away for my own sake within those last couple of years that they had Anthony Lynn. So yeah, I totally get that. Kind of starting to buy into the Harbaugh. I'm seeing how that plays out before I actually let myself get back together with them. But yeah, tell us how you became a fan of your respected UFL team, the Panthers. I'm guessing you're local to Michigan. But how did you end up covering them?
I mean, yep, like you said, local. I'm in the south central part of the state, a little south of
Hmm.
Lansing, so not too terribly, not too fairly far. Obviously, when they were announced they came back, obvious choice to pick up the Panthers. So did
Right.
that, and then just created a Panthers page because I kind of wanted to do something with podcasting and covering the Defenders back in 2020. Didn't really get into full swing on that. Then, of course, things ended and never really took it back up. But then, of course, obviously the opportunity came up with the USFL and the Panthers coming back, and then just kind of started posting and starting covering it and joined PFN Discord and kind of went on from there. Got really involved and started learning and chatting with some players and coaches and all that, and just yeah, kind of snowballed from there.
Right on. That's super cool. Did you make it to any games last year?
Oh yeah, every single Panthers home game. Had season tickets, made sure I went every single game. Then did go down
Awesome.
to. I told the team, or not that they listened to me necessarily over Twitter, but I put it on Twitter that if they made it to the USFL champion or North Championship, that I would be going down to Canton. They managed to do that. I went down to Canton, and then so obviously they lost, and I have some opinions on that game. But then I did also make it back down to Canton the next week for the championship game and rooted for the Stallions as much as that pained me to do. But yeah, so 7 games in total last year.
Awesome. I currently I live in California, but last year I was living in Ithaca and was lucky enough to make it to their week 3 game. I went to the Stars game and the Panthers game that same day, but I think in hindsight I definitely would have rather gone to that week 10 matchup.
Yeah, that environment was crazy. I loved the attendance for that week 3 matchup for the Panthers versus the Generals, but obviously that game went way sideways, way quicker than I had expected. So that was a little disappointing, though the fans were great. But then they showed back up week 10, and yeah, that was fantastic. I still probably one of my favorite games I've gone to, and I've gone to, a few here and there.
Right on. I actually think it was week 4 because the game that I went and saw
Oh,
was when they got shellacked by the Showboats.
yeah,
Um,
I was not as confident in that game as other people were with their performance against the Generals the week before. But yeah, that was heartbreaking. And then yeah, you
yeah,
wouldn't have seen great attendance at that point either.
right. Still a great experience, though. I'm excited to see how attendance kind of fluctuates throughout this season.
So am I. I feel like week one's going to be a little rough in attendance, especially for the Panthers with, we just getting single game tickets out this past Wednesday. Hopefully people start selling it. It did seem like what I saw posted is that there were, quite a bit of interest. So hopefully that turns into a really good attendance because that first week, especially against a passionate fan base in St. Louis, that's really a game that I would like to see the Panthers fan base come in and show out. So I'm hopeful. I would like to see, but if we start slow and end up big again in terms of attendance, I'll be happy.
Right, right. Yeah, I'll be really interested to see not just how the Panthers fans show out for that, but I'm also really interested, just kind of from an impartial standpoint, just how attendance is in general. Because I would imagine St. Louis isn't too far of a drive from Detroit, so I would guess that some Battlehawk fans um, would travel well and fill up some more seats.
It's probably a little bit longer of a trek than you think. I've made actually the opposite drive down there one
Mm-hmm.
weekend. That was quite the poke, but yeah, I've seen enough. I know there were a lot of Battlehawks fans on my Twitter asking about, tickets because they were planning on coming up, and I fully expect that they're going to be. If there's one fan base to really travel to all of their away games, it's absolutely going to be them. And I'm
Without a
kind of a
doubt.
little scared at this point that they might actually outnumber us in week 1 just because of how big and passionate their fan base is, which is great for the league. But you know, my biases, not going to make that as not looking forward to that. But I definitely appreciate them and they're coming out and hopefully they help really boost sales.
Right. And you never know. Anything can happen. Week one is. I've always kind of viewed the first week and kind of week two in spring football as almost like a preseason game, because there's just so much craziness that happens. There's so much chaos. Like there's so much guys coming in and out more often than you see later on in the season. So I mean, I really do think anything could happen.
Oh yeah, certainly. I'm excited for it. I think that there's a lot of confidence in the XFL teams more so than the USFL teams, but we'll see. I'm hoping it's a little closer than a lot of people think.
I definitely think it is. I for sure think that a lot of these teams, from a pure raw talent standpoint, are a lot closer um, to each other than some people may think. I think in a lot of cases, Michigan being one of them, it's going to come down to coaching.
Absolutely. There were some questionable decisions last year that on top of sputtering offense, the coaching decisions didn't help any in some of those games, especially the losses. So uh, that's it's now Nolan's second year, so I feel like him actually having the staff that he wants, having the roster that he wants, because of how late in the game he came last year. I think he was in what January, February, he was named head coach, and
Right.
with April right around the corner, he did not get the chance to build the staff and the roster that he wanted. But yeah, a lot of also first year coaches on the coordinators this year, so that's still a lot of question marks. Absolutely.
Right. You make a good point. I actually didn't realize that he had been hired on so close to the season, so that does make sense. Why at times they seem so discombobulated. But that is a good point. I am really interested to see if we get a little bit more stability out of this team than last year, because something that you touched on earlier, which kind of plays into my next question, you mentioned that USFL North championship game where I mean that had to be one of the most undisciplined defensive fourth quarter performances I've ever watched from any team. And I got a lot of flack from Panthers fans saying that I had some kind of bias towards Pittsburgh, and like I had no horse in that race just watching the game. And I watched it twice, and because I wanted to make sure that like I wasn't coming at it from an angle of unreason. But I watched that whole fourth quarter twice and was watching all those flags fly, and I'm like, no, that's a good call. That's a good call. That's a good call. So I want you to kind of touch on that because you mentioned it earlier, and then with that being how your team's season ended, talk about how you felt then, and then where you currently stand with them, and how you feel in the context of the new league and all the roster movement league wide. Like, do you feel better or more hesitant going into the new year?
Yeah, so you and I definitely at this point disagree with how that fourth quarter went in the North Championship game last year. Granted, I have not gone back to actually watch it on TV, and so I'll take it wherever I super biased as I am. The horse obviously I had a big horse in the race, so I'm going to be biased towards the fact that I thought a lot of those calls were absolutely trash against the Panthers. But again,
Sure.
I really have no desire to go back and rewatch that because that just was a heartbreaking overtime loss. So,
Right.
from a non-neutral observer, I definitely disagree, but I might have to suck it up and just rewatch that fourth quarter to see if it was truly as bad as it appeared to us, at least, especially watching live from Canton. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so that left a sour taste in my mouth. Obviously, as a Lions fans, Michigan fan, Panthers fan, we think the three fan bases kind of all feel, at least the two feel that the refs are always against us. So I feel like that carried in, and maybe I just have that preset defensive position that no, refs are out to get my team, and so that but it definitely left a sour taste. And outside of that, they still needed to beat the refs, even if it was the refs' fault. But overall, I felt like they definitely underperformed for the roster that they had. You can look on my Twitter. I've said it multiple times. I absolutely loved the roster last year. From a
Mm-hmm.
USFL standpoint, you watch Cole Murphy's interview with James Larson from a few months ago, and he basically said the same thing. Like that, the roster underperformed. Loved the guys, loved the group of guys. Felt like they definitely had the potential, and if you at least watch the scores, they weren't really ever out of the games until
Right.
middle
Mm-hmm.
of the fourth quarter, late fourth quarter. So it wasn't like they were just completely embarrassed and outperformed from, first whistle to the last. But
Right.
definitely,
I
yeah, they,
agree.
they underachieved. I do think that at the very least they had a better roster than what they showed out with. Then the offseason acquisitions and going into this merger, absolutely, I think we are in a better position. I still think what's going to hinge or what the season's going to hinge on is the offensive line again. Though, fortunately, it does seem like we have quarterbacks that are a little more mobile than what we had last year,
Mm-hmm.
with the exception of Barrier. But unless we want to get into that source subject, I'm going to just pretend that Barrier wasn't on the roster last year and that we only had Love and Strong. But that's what Marty and Nolan decided to go for, and those guys just didn't have the mobility, especially Strong with his knee, and
Right.
I think having that combination of a lack of a mobile quarterback and offensive line that just never really was that stout, even for you know, especially for a spring football league. I think that kind of doomed us. And then the defense just kept getting worn down. As great as the defense was, they, you get worn down, especially when you keep giving offenses the short field, especially on those turnovers. So if that is fixed this year, and that is a big if, that's my biggest question mark going into this season. But assuming it's retooled like I hope and expect it to be, I see everybody doubting the Panthers this year as kind of all right, cool. I bet we'll see how that actually turns out, but I think they'll be better than a lot of people expect, if especially if the O line is retooled and functioning properly.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in the context of understanding that the USFL North last year wasn't necessarily very good, you know, they still almost won a playoff game. And I don't think it would surprise me in the least this year if they were at least in the conversation towards the latter half of the year. I think a lot of people are completely looking over this roster.
Yeah, and at least for maybe week one, that's a good thing because I do think, as much as I hate the team, I do think St. Louis is probably more talented than I want to give them credit for. So if everybody wants to sleep on the Panthers, at least at the start of the season, I am all for it. Not that I have no confidence in my team, but any leg up, I'm not gonna hate on.
Let's really quickly touch on some of the coordinator changes. 2 years of Eric Marty leading this offense, to me, I feel like him coming back for a third year would led to a lot more hot mic moments from EJ Perry or whoever ends up being the starter at quarterback. Yelling that he needs a play. My brain goes to the moment in that playoff game where he's yelling because it's third or fourth down, and he has to call a timeout because the play clock's running low. He's yelling, "Marty, I need a play that could have cost us the game." So Marcel Bellafuel steps in at OC and hopefully will bring new life to what is, we mentioned already, has the raw talent there. And then you have Colin Bauer stepping in at DC, who was the linebackers coach last year. And I had no problem with their defensive performance last year, so I'm interested to see how that change at DC affects them. But talk about how you feel about the changes at both coordinator positions.
Yeah, I didn't dislike Marty. I'm kind of more neutral on him being released. I think that if he was forced
Mm-hmm.
into adopting EJ Perry as his quarterbacks earlier in the season, maybe there would have been a little bit more of cohesion. But
Sure.
obviously, looking at what the Stars did the last two seasons, and Belfway being the wide receivers coach for the Stars, now obviously the first time getting handed the OC position, at least title in spring football here, that I'm pretty confident like he's got a lot of his guys that he brought over or that Nolan brought over, and now he gets to recoach again, continue to coach the guys. So I have some confidence there. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
looking at the QB room the way it is now, I don't think we're going to have quite the same issues at the QB position. So, good. That O line showed up. We still have Tim Holt, maybe him having a second season, learning spring football a little bit, getting getting everything dialed down, the details dialed down, figure out what exactly we need for spring football and needs from the quarterbacks. I have a lot of confidence there. So I'm excited to see it. That's definitely, like I said, O line's still my biggest thing, my question mark. But
Mm-hmm.
I have no reason to think that Belfway and Nolan can't come up with something that surpasses the performance that we saw last year. Because I don't, unless they look like last year's Maulers on offense, I don't think they can really do worse. So at least the very least,
Mm-hmm.
we should be stable. But as far as defense, I thought Nolan and Brown did a fantastic job. But Bauer, who did a fantastic job with the D line last year, because the front seven combination with Bauer and Runza at those position coaches, they were by far the best. The front seven was really, really solid for the Panthers. So
Mm-hmm.
having Bauer get the chance to be DC, seeing what he did with the D line last year, I'm comfortable. I'm confident. Like I like seeing these young guys get the opportunities. Obviously, I think being younger, maybe be a little hungrier, and hopefully maybe he pulls Jaron Horton like Horton did with the Maulers last year, and that we just have a beastly defense. And I see no reason why that doesn't happen, especially with the offseason acquisition. So my take is I'm really excited for the new off coordinators. I think both are great. Both are exactly what we maybe didn't need the new blood on the defense, but I'm certainly not hating it. I don't know why Brown left, but I definitely think Bauer is a good fit. I think he's going to be very competent.
For sure. Yeah, you make a great point about both of them, really, because for me, my favorite unit to watch on the 2023 Michigan Panthers was without a doubt that front seven. And, bringing guys like Breland Speaks and Frank Ginda back. And then they also, check my notes here real quick. I know they had some pretty solid re signings and additions. I like that they brought back Walter Palmore and that they brought in TJ Carter. I think those will be really, really useful pieces to a guy in Bauer who clearly seems to know what he's doing. And then as far as Marcel Bellefeuille, I think this will work because you have a quarterback in EJ Perry who I would advocate for him to be the starter. I'd like to get your take on that. But if you have a guy like that, and then the familiarity that he brings over with the receiving core, which a lot of them came over from Philadelphia, I definitely think you have a chance to have a very competent passing game.
Oh, absolutely. I'm still not sure if we have a true wide receiver one. I was really surprised that we cut 2022's leading receiver for the Panthers in Lance Lenore.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, he was with the Guardians last year in the XFL, but thought having him come back this year was going to be a really big boom. Obviously, it didn't seem like it went that way. But we did just pick up. Granted, he was released from the Defenders this on final cut day, or this first cut on Sunday. But we got Hightower, who
Mm-hmm.
said was just with DC. So he, if you're a fan of the G5 at all, Mountain West, he apparently was definitely extremely dangerous for Boise State, and I feel like he has quite a bit of potential. I mean, he has some NFL experience, so he's clearly not a scrub. Um, but overall, yeah, I love the solid wide receiver room, especially the guys that Belfway is familiar with. And then as far as QB, yeah, I think Perry, this should be Perry's job to lose. I think Etling is very capable of pushing for that QB1 spot, and maybe even Cheek. I know he didn't really get much of a chance in New Orleans last year, but I mean MBT was MBT. He was fantastic last year, so I completely get why Cheek maybe not have gotten that opportunity to play QB, but I feel like the QB room's capable. And I know I'm just kind of like, oh yeah, I like all, but I mean, honestly, kind of with the combination, with the merging, and then being able to kind of pick up all the players from the dead teams, like I, every roster's gotten better, and I see, like you said, Panthers are definitely one of those. Um, but yeah, I know. I want TJ or I want EJ. I want him to be the guy to go in with what he did week 10 for us last year, winning that, well, dropping 370 yards on the USFL's top defense in that North Championship game. I
Right.
think it should be his job to lose, but I'm not going to be upset if Etling pushes him for it. But I still think EJ edges it out and gets in, but we'll be in good position regardless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, I'm a big advocate for EJ Perry to start. Because he took that offense that was just dead in the water last year and almost instantly made them exciting. And you mentioned that playoff game where he dropped 370 on the Maulers, and that was a really great showcasing. Also, in such a short amount of time being with the team, to put on display what a really good processing quarterback he is. He also has really good accuracy, And what I didn't know about him, just because I didn't know a whole lot about EJ Perry to begin with, up until he started for Michigan, was what a rocket launcher of an arm he has, that doesn't lose accuracy with distance. And he is really mobile, and he will use his legs, and they can also design plays specifically for that. And then I honestly don't know a whole lot about Danny Etling, outside of the fact that he played at LSU, bounced around the NFL for a little bit. Um, but I would say that if he does beat out EJ Perry for the starting spot, I wouldn't feel uncomfortable by that.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of my mindset with seeing how well EJ did. That if someone can beat him out for the job, then that just means we're in just that much better of a position to be
Mm-hmm.
successful at quarterback. So yeah, absolutely agree with you 100%.
Moving on to the running backs. Now, I know some Michigan fans are missing Reggie Corbin, and it's totally valid. Although I felt like adding Wes Hills was a great move after he finished. I'm pretty sure he was second in rushing yards in USFL last year, and I want to say he was top two in all-purpose yards. Don't quote me on that, but I think between Hills and Corbin, from a pure runner standpoint, I think Hills is better, not by a staggering amount, but definitely an upgrade. And you can do a little bit more with Hills on the passing side of things. I like that Matt Colburn is coming over from Philadelphia, had a bit of a down year as a runner last year, because just of a completely putrid O line from the Stars, and also wasn't really used as much in their passing game, where he did prove to be effective in 2022. But I personally like the combo of Hills and Colburn. I think you can rotate them in and out a lot. Screens are definitely in play with both, and they both have the capability to be called upon for short yardage. So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I would also not sleep on McCrary.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's probably maybe my dark horse to actually take the RB1 spot, though that is
Really?
definitely going to be a tall task with, like you said, with Colburn and Hills, especially ahead of him. But if I'm not sure how many running backs we keep. If we keep three, then I think that we could really have a really deep running back room. And again, I think all three would get carries. Think Toa is still probably like he should be in the mix. I haven't seen really any film on any camp film on these guys, so little hard for me to say. But I mean, beating around the bush, yeah, like I love our RB room. I think Hills. I believe he was actually the leading rusher. I'm not sure who, or was Thompson the leading rusher last year? Or I thought
It was
Hills
either
had
him or
that.
Hills. It was one of the two.
Either way, one of the two backs. I'm thrilled to have him. I kind of figured with Reggie not getting protected, though it turns out that was a personal decision on Reggie. But I
Hmm,
feel
I
like
didn't know
Wes
that.
probably would still have that good inside chance of taking that RB1 spot. So rambling aside, yeah, Wes Hills I think is going to get it, but familiar with Belfway, we'll see. But expect Wes Hills probably to be the RB1, and I'm not going to complain one bit about that.
Right, right. So this receiving room, I also really want to touch on just to kind of close out the offensive side of things. Um, so talking about the receivers and the tight ends, I would say this whole core is the definition of pretty good, not necessarily great, but pretty good. With tight end, you got, I mean, it's actually it's literally just Cole Hicatini and a couple guys out of college that I'm just not well versed on. I love Hicatini, but it is looking a little thin at tight end. As far as wide receivers go, like we talked about, they brought in a lot of the guys from Philadelphia coming over with. I'm calling him Belfield. What's his name? How do you pronounce it?
I'm pretty sure it's Belfway.
Belfway. I've been saying it wrong this whole episode, but like we were saying, that should bode well for them. And you touched on this too, and I agree. Nobody really stands out to me as a definite alpha number one receiver, but you can work with that. You don't necessarily have to have a number one receiver if you can have a group of guys that are one of three, if that makes sense. You know, and I think that any combination between having Trey Quinn, who's been with this team for a few years, Devin Gray, Jordan Sewell, or Marcus Sims, I think any combination of those guys on the field give you more than enough options. I can definitely see a lot of screens and jet sweeps with Marcus Sims, some man beaters with Sewell and Gray, option routes with a veteran like Quinn who knows how to find the soft spot in the zone and sit down in it. Talk about some of the guys you'll be looking at throughout the year and maybe some guys I haven't mentioned.
Yeah, you as you mentioned, Sims, I actually think that he's probably got a higher ceiling than I think a lot of people really give him credit for. I had
Mm-hmm.
seen him in
I
the
agree.
effort and talent that he had prior to his week 10 special teams performance, which was absolutely deserving of that special teams player of the week award that he won. Dude is like absolute beast. I saw he had a couple good, really good catches and yards after catch against the Breakers, and I thought that he really helped to put us in that position to win that game. Obviously, that didn't happen, but I think he was a big part of that, especially on uh, the one catch that he had in the yards after that. How just put it put his feet in the ground and managed to get that strong first down. Then of course Quinn. last year comes in and was an immediate threat. We saw that with and Sims as well with the North Championship game. Like they both had
Mm-hmm.
tremendously long touchdowns, long catches. So both of them were able to get into open space, be able to make a huge play with EJ Perry in his arm. So I look at those two as probably our biggest guys to look for. Their familiarity with with Nolan and all that. But me, I'm really looking to hopefully have Samson Nakua come in and be be a another Puka for the USFL or for the UFL like his younger brother did for the NFL this past season. So I'm hoping for that. I mean, he looks like he got the raw deal with getting released last year out of the Maulers pretty early in the season, but I have hope for him. Like, I mean, you look at that family and they're just players, they're just ballers. So hopefully maybe he gets a chance, but otherwise I'm
Yeah,
really excited for Hightower. I think that recent acquisition, hopefully maybe it just was not clicking with DC and maybe he, you know, we see flashes of his performance that he did while he was at Boise.
yeah, I could be wrong about this too, but I feel like Samson Nakua had a really strong end to the season once he was familiar with that offense. He started becoming more of a factor, and then yeah, Marcus Sims, I'm
Well,
definitely looking to take the next step.
Nakua was actually he was released by the Maulers the beginning of last year, and he wasn't picked up until this off season. So we haven't seen
Oh,
him
okay,
in the Panthers offense. So this
okay.
is he's coming in. Because yeah, it
Oh,
looks
it's
like
Kai
I have it
Nakua.
here. He was signed at the end of October, so this is
Gotcha.
his first foray into with the Panthers. But
No,
otherwise, yeah,
no, you got me on
I
that one. I was actually thinking of Kai Nakua, who's on defense. I knew there was
yeah,
a Nakua
yeah.
on the Panthers last year who had a pretty decent season. I just got the name wrong.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. Kai was fantastic on defense coming in, like you said, midseason. He really got to play, nickel and all that. So kind of moved him around, got him to play a few different positions. And like I said, the family is just athletes, like they're ballers,
Yeah, absolutely.
and I'm excited to have the brothers on the team like that, and maybe to have some good luck from Puka, like him supporting the team and his brothers will maybe we can get some of his mojo.
Right. So we touched on the front seven already. How I was going to lead into the defensive side of things was asking who do you think is actually going to end up playing or calling plays for the defensive side.
I I fully expect it's going to be Bauer. Hopefully, because from my understanding, from how Nolan sees, I think he knows that he needs to be kind of more that CEO. Um,
Mm-hmm.
he's going to have obviously his experience. He's going to be able to kind of coach and lead Bauer, but I'd like to see Bauer get the chance to call the plays and lead that defense. And I think if Nolan is able to let him, take control of that, um, I think sky's the limit.
Right, right. And for these linebackers, I mean, I don't know if you necessarily want to say this is the most underrated or dark horse, but it's a linebacker room that I feel like needs to be getting more attention than it is. Of course, you have Frank Genda coming back, who out of everybody signed in the UFL, that was one of the ones that I was just waiting for the longest. And when it finally happened, I jumped for joy. I was so happy to see him back with the Panthers because this man just loves hitting people. He averaged 11 tackles a game last year and finished with 100 in total or 110 in total. And he didn't even play every game. He was hurt in week one, which might change his actual average. But in terms of a 10-game season, uh, finishing with 100 over 100 tackles where you're not even on the field for every single game is incredible. And then Breland Speaks, of course, coming off an all USFL 2023, where he showed why he was a second round pick for the Kansas City Chiefs. And then Gerard Fernandez, I thought was a really solid addition from the Breakers. He's just a wrecking machine as well. So I think it's clear that you have your starters. My only concern would be depth, and maybe there's something about one of these second year guys or rookies that I'm not keen to. Um, I'm sure there is to a degree, but overall, I feel like this could be a top 3 or 4 front seven. My hope, of course, would just be that everybody stays healthy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I Right now we only have 6 guys rostered. I don't know that you could really go with less, maybe one, but otherwise, I would like to see that at least us keep the 6 because, like you said, depth might be a little bit of the issue for the Panthers. But I love Dawkins and Deshaun White. Like those two really came to play last year. White being a true rookie last year, coming in, played well enough coming in middle of the season to earn himself a chance. Granted, late NFL camp body, but still got the opportunity. Signed and had his day in NFL camp last year. Obviously earned that playing in the USFL for the Panthers. So like I'm super high on him. I think his upside is is higher than other people have given credit. I think he's kind of flown under the radar. I think that's a mistake for people to see that. But Dawkins, he's been a playmaker, played fantastic last year. And then obviously, like you said, Fernandez and Ginda are the clear 2 top LBs, like 1 and 2 that are going to be the ones to
Mhm.
probably really carry that group. But I don't see a weak link in the 6 guys that we have.
That's good to know. That probably makes a lot of people uh, who might be concerned about this defense, which I don't know if there's many, but I think that adds a lot of solidarity. So, getting into the cornerback rooms, I just really want to touch on the cuts of all USFL corner Shalom Luani, and also they got rid of Warren Sabah, who I thought was really solid last year. Do you agree with these moves, or what? Where do you stand?
Yeah, I'm a little. eh, Sabo's definitely a fan favorite for us and certainly for me, so it kind of hurt seeing him go. But I guess, especially because of his size and some of the offseason acquisitions that we had at that position, not surprised that Warren was one of the guys cut. So I expected it, so it wasn't coming to a shock to me. So maybe it's not quite a shock to the system. I'm not as upset because I kind of figured that it was coming. But he's a
Mm-hmm.
playmaker. He was really good. I was really disappointed when he got cut in 2022 because he was injured and just with the way that the rosters were and the no IR, um, that we had to release him. But was super happy to have him come back last year to get when he got re-signed. But yeah, not a shock, but I love him. I think that speaks to the depth that we have because he was a solid player for us last year. But yeah, Lawani, that one came out of left field for me. I fully expected that he was going to be vying vying for the final positions. Maybe getting cut with the final third, cutting down to 50. But in the first round of cuts, no, that was definitely a shock. I know he's not the youngest one. He's one of the older in the group, but I mean, I don't know. Like maybe that just speaks to just how deep and talented this the secondary is, and that's what I'm going with. That's my theory.
No, it totally makes sense. Um, the additions that they made on the secondary. Um, how do I articulate this? So I think one of the most important focuses for this defense over the offseason was bringing back most of those key pieces that were already there on the front seven, and then improving the secondary, which I think they absolutely did. They brought in Tornadin and Keith Gibson from Pittsburgh, and they also brought in Nate Brooks from that championship Birmingham team last year. Um, And I get the feeling that these guys kind of fit the scheme a little bit better that Mike Nolan wants to run. And arguably what worked best for his defense last year. I can see this being a decently man coverage heavy defense again that can blanket guys and let the front seven get after the quarterback and shut down the run. So I definitely think they have the roster talent to exponentialize on their potential and even be great.
Absolutely. That's kind of exactly the same mindset that I had is allow the front seven to, to really get at the quarterback and get some, hopefully have the secondary help them get some coverage sacks. I definitely think that there is that potential for that. Like you said, it exactly the way that the secondary has been built.
Absolutely. So overall, where do you think this defense ends up ranking? Because I think they're set up to remain a top 3 unit. I mean, as far as last year goes, they were, I believe, third overall in defense. Let me double check that. I actually have it written down here in my notes. They were fifth overall in defense. That's my mistake. But they, I don't think they played like a number 5 defense. I think they
Not at
played,
all.
yeah, no, they play like a top 3 unit. I mean, like I said, the numbers don't necessarily correlate, but stats can be deceiving. And, with them retaining most of the guys that helped them get there, and arguably where they got even better with the secondary, just leaps and bounds in improvement over the offseason. So I think they definitely could very well be a top half of the UFL defensive unit.
Yeah, I see no reason why I think they can't be that top 3 unit or even be the best unit, defensive unit in the league. I do think, like you said, stats maybe a little deceptive. I mean, when you have an offense that performed as badly as they did, like in
Mm-hmm.
always leaving the opposing offenses in a pretty good position to have a shorter field than desirable. You
Right.
that throughout the game, like your defense is going to get worn down, and they did. It was great to see them fight through that and win in week 10, but I think that was just they had nothing to lose at that point. But throughout the rest of the year, yeah, getting worn down definitely didn't help their stats when they didn't have that counter, they didn't have that balance with the offense. So do think that's a little misleading. If the offense is
Mm-hmm.
better, then I see no reason to think that they won't be, and I think that helps the defense as well, include in top of the offseason additions.
Yeah, absolutely. You do bring up a great point for some of the people who might not have watched this team last year, and turnovers and giving opposing teams short fields were kind of a common theme with the Michigan Panthers last year. And I definitely think that's why those stats are misleading. Because as we said, they definitely have the roster potential um, to be a top half defense.
Absolutely. And not to just put all of the blame on the offense, but special teams didn't help us throughout the year either. So that certainly is not helpful.
Right. So let's give a quick, just overall summary for Michigan. I think the Panthers, at the very least, are going to keep things interesting throughout the year. Um, I hope that I hope that they're going to be super competitive at minimum. And even if we do see a third straight losing season, which I hope we don't, they'll be making games a close contest. I think they have a ton of potential if they can play clean, disciplined football, and if the offense doesn't take more than the first 2 weeks to get going. Again, the only real question I have for the Panthers is Mike Nolan. I like him as a coach. I've just never really seen him as a great football mind. He is a good leader of men. I think it's clear that the players have bought into him. Um, but are we going to see this team make costly mistakes late in close games again this year? that for sure is my main concern, because if you look at how this team is from a raw talent perspective, I would just reiterate, they're closer to some of the better teams in the league than the latter.
I agree. Like you said, that there was some game management decisions, especially what I can think of in terms of on Nolan's side, especially was that weird challenge against the Breakers that left the Panthers without a very important timeout that would have
Mm-hmm.
potentially helped them be able to come back and win that game. So yeah, sure that up, then I think, where there's potential there. But yeah, that's definitely a question mark that I have too. Now that he's actually had a second year, a chance to be a second year head coach, while others obviously are in their second and third year, maybe that does play, a big role.
And before we get into win total projections, I have to ask the hard question. I'm sorry, I did save it for last, so we didn't have a dark cloud hanging over this whole conversation. But while I got you, we got to talk about that DC scrimmage and what we heard about it. 12 sacks and 2 defensive touchdowns against the Panthers. People are saying either DC is the best defense or Michigan has the worst offense. And does that concern you at all, or is this still early on enough that it's figure outable?
I mean, it's a scrimmage. I'm not going to
Yeah.
put any real emphasis on that. And partly, like, I think I was a little more worried until there was a message by Jaron Horton in the PFN Discord. He had said the other day that take it with a grain of salt, because for what it's worth, his Maulers, quote unquote, dominated the Stallions in their 2022 scrimmage. And then we saw the season play out with the Maulers going 1-9 and the Stallions going 9-1 and then winning the championship, the inaugural USFL championship. So if if getting dominated helped propel the Stallions to winning their first championship, then maybe I should actually be excited for that they got their butts kicked, and maybe that propels the Panthers to winning. But so yeah, with that information in mind, with that, I guess I'm not super concerned.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have, like, I don't think Ginda played. I don't think a lot of the starters played. So like
Okay.
it's going to be one of those, maybe it might be a depth issue, but if our starters stay healthy, like, I guess I'm not super concerned about it. Maybe I'm just trying to look through it through rose-colored glasses. But again, the scrimmage makes me nervous because it doesn't dispel any thoughts of what could be the potential floor of my team. But yeah, I'm not going to put too much into it, and I want to see what they do against St. Louis in Week 1. That's going to be a much bigger tell for me than the reports of what Greg Williams said on a podcast.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the reactions that we've been seeing about that are a little, I don't know if I necessarily want to say inflammatory for a lack of a better word, but I'm kind of on the same page with you. I'm like, it's a scrimmage. You can't put too much stock in that. Week 1 is where I feel like weeks 1 through 3 are where you're really gonna be able to see not just what Michigan's gonna look like, but really for any team in any football league.
Yeah, I mean, there were questions about just how good the Stallions were last year, and then all of a sudden, after like week 3 or week 4, it was clear that no, it's the same old Stallions from 2022. So, you know,
Right.
you can't read too much into the first couple weeks, at least, until at least after the couple weeks.
Right. So I'm interested to hear what your projected win total, what your over under win total would be for Michigan. I have them at 5.5 wins. That's a bit high from what I've been seeing from some other pages. But I honestly, I really do think if things come together, they have the roster strength to finish at least mid pack. Um, it's a bit brutal. This team only won one home game last year, and that they start the year with three straight, being against St. Louis and Birmingham in two out of those three matchups. I think they're. I think if they're able to scrap out 2 or 3 wins in that midsection of the year, um, and depending on how hot this team is rolling into the last 3 weeks of the year, I would say they're capable of winning all three if come week 10 a playoff spot is on the line. I think there is a world where they put this thing together and they rip off 6 or 7 wins and make it into the tournament. But I also see a world where this doesn't work and Mike Nolan doesn't hit the necessary check marks as the guy in charge. And this thing completely falls apart and you don't capitalize on what really was a very good offseason for Michigan. So I'm hoping that we get I hope that we get that 6 or 7 win season. But what say you?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go with my bias here and say we get at least 6 wins.
Mm-hmm.
Gun to my head, I think it's probably going to be closer to 5, but
Mm-hmm.
one game difference, but I mean that could be literally the difference between missing the playoffs and making the playoffs, especially since they're doing that top two teams in the conference way again, which much chagrin to the St. Louis fan base, I'm sure. But
Right.
yeah, let's go with 6. I see no reason why they can't get there. I feel like anything less than that would be a little bit down here, regardless of what other, pages want to say. Like they've been down on the Panthers for years, and sure, I think the last couple of years have kind of given them some fuel to that, but there's been so many different circumstances surrounding that. And now that you look at the pieces that we got, like some of the important pieces that were a big factor of the lack of success, we changed those. I don't see a reason to think that we got much of a repeat unless I don't see the showboats or the the Roughnecks being head and shoulders above the Panthers. So I
Mm-hmm.
definitely think that there's that opportunity, really for the Panthers to get that number 2 seed in the USFL conference. See no reason why that's not obtainable. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we don't get there, but I'm not going to be like shocked that they do.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with you. I think I would disagree with you as far as Memphis goes. I think Memphis for me is honestly probably my dark horse team um, to win it all. Um, but in terms of teams like Houston or San Antonio, um, and honestly, kind of at this point, even the Defenders, just because I personally have a lot of questions about them and their offense. Um, I would say, I kind of sound like a broken record, but those teams really are a lot closer than you think they are.
Yeah, I mean, the Showboats had to bring Josh Love in the QB room. So outside of Cookus, I don't like their depth. I like Coach Flip, honestly. But I don't know. I'm not as high on them as others, but at the very
Mm-hmm.
least, they finished no worse than 3 in the USFL.
Right. So, will you be going to any Michigan Panthers games this year? And if not, which one would you most want to attend? And that can be Panthers games, or that can be just any game going on around the league.
Oh, I have my tickets renewed. I am going to be
Oh
front and
hell yeah,
center, front row, 50-yard line behind the Panthers bench. Already all
hell yeah,
set. So
man!
I'm all ready to go. 2 weeks. I'll be in Detroit at this time. Yeah, about 2 weeks.
Right on. All right, well, let's go ahead and wrap this up with a quick lightning round of some fun questions. Give us your favorite football memory.
We talking in general or just
Any
or
football
you?
memory.
I mean, how about that Charles Woodson one-handed interception against Michigan State? I'm old enough to remember it, seen it. didn't see it live, wasn't in East Lansing, but uh, definitely gonna be one of my favorites.
Right on. What kind of foods are you going to be enjoying on opening weekend? What are your favorite game day snacks?
Uh, Probably some light beer and pretzels, hot dogs. You got to go with the classics. Get in that football mood.
What are uh what are three UFL players that you're going to be on the lookout for this year?
Well, I'd be remiss to not mention Frank Ginda, see if he can
Absolutely.
repeat. But I'll go for the next two. I'll go outside of the Panthers. I want to see Matt Corral. I think that
Hmm.
he's rocking the number two. Is he second coming of Magoo for the Stallions this year? I am kind of looking forward to seeing him, and then I want to see what Teamu does for the defenders if he can re-earn that Offensive Player of the Year award. He unfortunately won't have Abram Smith to be his lead horse running back, so we'll see. And he doesn't quite have the same talent level at wide receiver as he did last year, so we'll see if he can make some magic.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to. I'm trying to come up with different lists for each of these guest episodes, just so that I have variation and more players to talk about. Um, as far as the Michigan Panthers go, I'm definitely looking forward to Frank Ginda. That's a no-brainer. I'm really excited to watch EJ Perry.
Yeah.
And then Matt Corral is a guy that I mentioned the other day when I was talking to Defenders District. I'm really stoked to watch him. Who else? Hakeem Butler was a name that was mentioned in that conversation as well that I would feel remiss uh, to not bring up again. Really, that whole St. Louis Battlehawks wide receiver room. Um, Vontae Diggs. Vontae Diggs, for sure. I felt like he was the most underappreciated linebacker in the USFL last year. So I'm pretty stoked to watch him again this year.
Yeah, he definitely had quite a bit of a chip on his shoulder for that, and I guess I wouldn't be surprised seeing him ball out again and really make himself known. He was in year one, and I think that underrated last year, so maybe he's out with that chip. Yeah, dude's a beast, so I wouldn't be surprised.
Right on, man. Well, this has been incredibly enlightening. I really appreciate you coming on, Jake. Tell the people where they can follow you, give your social medias, your podcast handle, all that good stuff.
Well, probably the quickest answer to any of your questions today. I am at UFL Panthers, or sorry, UFL Shadow on all of the platforms. So pretty easy to find me.
Awesome. Well, be sure to give him a follow, guys. Once again, thank you so much for coming on and doing this with me, man. And I hope we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you having me.
All right, man. Take care.
You too.
All right, well, that is going to wrap it up for this episode of Fourth Down and Goal. Thank you guys once again so much for joining me. And just hats off to Jake from Panthers Shadow, man. Just such an insightful conversation. And it's interesting to have a conversation with somebody who, of course, is going to have some degree of a bias towards their favorite team, and of course the team that they're covering, which is completely valid. But I'm kind of somebody who I don't really have a horse in this race, and it was really interesting that we actually found a lot of common ground in our breakdown of this Michigan Panthers roster. So again, just a phenomenal conversation. Hats off to him. Can't thank him enough. Be sure to go follow him if you want to follow this show. My Instagram is at Fourth Down and Goal Pod, and my Twitter is at Fourth Down Goal Pod. Again, sounds silly, but I'll fix it at some point, and we'll get there. While you're at it, if you wouldn't mind giving this show a quick 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcast, um, really is a quick and easy way to help my show grow, and it is greatly appreciated. If you're watching on YouTube, if you could give this video just a quick like, and if you want to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell while you're at it, would also be a great appreciation on my end. Once again, thank you for joining me. Keep on reaching for the pylons, and we'll see you next time. Later.